needs to cheer up back there. Hi, everybody. My name's Carla, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Carla.
Hi. I'm so delighted and privileged to be here tonight. I want to thank Ed in absentia. I understand he's already moved back to Portland, so he was quick, right? Just whoo, come in like a tornado and a good tornado and back out. So hi, Ed. And thank you, Neil, for all your help in getting me here, and then Taylor for picking me up and being such a great host to me. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. And to all of you for your warm hospitality. It's been nice to meet a few of you and have some dinner and just, celebrate another day sober. I still can't believe, my sobriety date is September 25th, 1987. And every single day I wake up and I say, thank you. And I don't, they have not all been, walks in the park either. And I'm glad they didn't tell me it was going to be. And especially when I was new, man, I was about 9 months sober when the obsession to drink alcohol was finally lifted for me. And every day, that gotta have a drink, have a drink on the way to work, have a drink on the way to the meeting, have a drink at the break, have a drink on the way home. Nobody will know, la, 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 la. That lullaby of rationalization finally lifted. So I did a lot of that work, walked with that till I was about 9 months sober. I wasn't sure that AA wasn't going to be just one more flash in the pan, one more thing that sounded really good and then just, kind of wears out. And the first cake I saw somebody take was for 22 years, and I thought I needed to see that. I needed to see people walking a few months ahead of me, but I needed to see that this worked long term. I grew up in institutions, so they were, that lasted 9 months, or for as long as I was locked up somewhere. That's how long my sobriety lasted. And I wasn't happy about any of that anyway, and I didn't even really understand what alcoholism was, that I have this allergy of the body, this abnormal reaction to alcohol, that for an alcoholic, the more I drink, the thirstier I get. I didn't get that. I just thought it's kind of snuck up on me. How does that happen, Because for me, alcoholism seemed to be kind of the least of everybody's problems, right? I was a badass drug addict or, any of that, but alcoholism, alcohol hung on to me, I couldn't let go without help. I just couldn't. And so really glad to be here and just here to tell you, if you're new, that it works. It really does. It's just not always going to be comfortable, and that's what the rest of us are here for. Just to encourage you to say, the discomfort doesn't last forever, but there's going to be some. And that's the grow zone. Still, all these years later, it's the grow zone, is little discomfort. And today, I know how to welcome it. I know how to sit with it, make room for it, and keep going. So, glad to be here, and I hope that you'll come and learn what we've learned and so far and sit with us. And most of all, I used to hear them say, let us love you till you can love yourself. And I thought, okay, that's nice. And then I heard somebody say, let us love you till you can love someone else. And I thought, oh, that's even better. Because when I'm loving you, I get to experience love regardless of whether you love me, right? I don't have to chase you around or try to please you or figure you out, I'm just, if I love you, I'm good. So, I don't know why I'm an alcoholic. I would have told you when I got here, it was my crazy, dark, dramatic, violent, perverted family that made me an alcoholic. If you had my family, you drink too. I'm one of those people that comes from one of those families. But I paid attention, when I got to AA, and I found people that had charmed childhoods. People like my husband, who some of you met a couple years ago at Winterfest, Like that guy, he comes from a family where he was the only boy. He had 4 sisters. They loved him, and they all grew up singing together and supporting each other. Somebody would get hurt, and they'd all love him and stuff, Still, after we've had a little bit of a family event like dinner or something, I come away with a little bit of a sugar headache. You know what I mean? It's just so sweet. And my family, we loved each other, but it was when the crap hit the fan, it was every man for himself. You know what I mean? So it was violent, and it was sick. It was just, we weren't a well family. So, but he sits right next to me in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why? Because alcohol did exactly foreign to him what it did foreign to me. And our big book says that any description of alcoholism that leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. You know, they had the spirituality. Spirituality's been around for thousands of years. Dr. Bob had spirituality up his, you know, to his ears. But when Bill came to visit him and talked about what happened when he drank, and the fact that it did so much for him, that even when he wasn't drinking, it was all he could think about. Oh my God, obsession, allergy, together provided handcuffs that I could not get out of on my own. And so I'm glad I know what I have. And if Just Don't Drink would have worked, you'd have a different speaker tonight. Because, of course, by the time that we get there to that place where I'm either drinking or thinking about drinking, then I can't spring it alone. I can't stop. I can't stop because that lullaby of rationalization just stays with me. And whether it's hours, and at the end, it was, you know, come to in the morning and then say, oh, I've got to stop this. And, you know, in an hour, I'm like ordering a drink because that's the only thing that would work. So I left home at an early age. And even though I jumped from the frying pan into the fire for a while, I still believe it was for me to leave home, but I ended up in some pretty dark places. And by the time I was 14, I ended up in a place called North Beach in the San Francisco area, learning how to turn tricks to make a living. And I'm not against sex. I'm not even against sex for money if that's working for people. It just wasn't on my list of things I wanted to be when I grew up, you know. Like if you had asked me a couple of years before, I would have told you I wanted to be the first woman to run a 4-minute mile, or the first woman president, or the first woman Major League Baseball player. That's who I wanted to be. And, you know, listening to the whispers of alcohol, I ended up in a very, very different place. And my alcoholic life seemed the only normal one. And I started getting locked up and spent time in juvenile hall and then placement. You might as well have stamped it on my forehead, waiting for placement, waiting for placement. I ended up in a mental hospital for a year. I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. And you know, I just sort of made myself at home and moved in. And doing the Thorazine shuffle and, you know, all that stuff back in the 70s, you know. And if you don't want to get bored in the nut house, you got to get busy. And one of my favorite ways to be busy was the boys. I loved all the boys, but my favorites were those sexy, smoldering types, you know, the kind. They just sit back there and simmer, you know. You just never really knew when they were going to blow. And I love those guys. Oh, my God. But the trouble with guys like that is that they eventually blow, and then they get hauled off back to YA, you know, which is junior prison, right? Prison for kids. And like my first boyfriend in the nut house got hauled away for throwing a big chair through the big plate glass window of the boys' unit, and my next boyfriend got hauled off for throwing a nurse through the big plate glass window of the boys' unit. So that was progressive too. And And I don't know about you, but I've always thought I should have a soundtrack to my life. You know, music playing in the background of all this drama going on, right? Isn't music kind of the background of our lives anyway? But I mean, you know, I took it to the, like maybe one day Bob Dylan singing a ballad, you know, just going on in my head, like Tangled Up in Blue. And maybe another day just a mariachi band and a Mexican fiesta, you know, just party. And then maybe another day, just flat out rock and roll, you know, because it's just like that. And I remember the day that my boyfriend Terry was being cuffed and escorted off by security because he's the one who threw the chair through the window. He's off and he's going, and I was sitting outside on the smoke break bench watching him go. And, you know, I was devastated. I was crushed. I mean, this had been a real relationship, you know, 2 or 3 weeks or something, you know, and nut house love is pretty intense. And I was smoking my tragic cigarettes and channeling Greta Garbo and hearing Diana Ross singing at top decibel from the music room, "Touch Me in the Morning," then just walk away. Oh, it hurt so good. And I love that Bill addresses this kind of thinking, you know, and we do change our thinking as we recover. Our big book promises that our thinking will change when it's cleared of wrong motives. And when we practice some meditation and 10 steps, you know, I do a much better 10 step when I'm doing 11, and I do a much better 11 when I'm doing 10, when I'm clear. You know, my thinking does get better. We come to rely on it. We come to rely on our intuition. You couldn't have said that to me, you know, about me when I was young. And I wasn't even practicing, I wasn't even trying. I knew about it. I had had a relationship early on when I was young, believing in some power greater than myself. I believed that there was some great spirit that ran in and around and through us. But by the time I was 15, it was barely intellectual, and it was like I thought, I knew it was good for somebody, but I couldn't make contact myself. And everything I put into my body trying to access that power were the very things that were blocking me. And it wasn't until I got sober that then, now it's only me blocking me, and we have steps for that. But it can be done, and so our thinking does improve. But back then it was just bad, and everything I did seemed to backfire on me. And I ended up running away from all of those places, a mental hospital, rehab, and the state hospital, juvenile hall in between, and then finally a girls' home. And I went out the second-story window of that place too, and hooked up with a boyfriend from a rehab. And I know that some of you can identify with that. That's where they keep a lot of the partners, right, in rehab. And we hit the rowdy road for the road of happy destiny, and we just became those kind of drunks that sleep by the side of the road and called it camping. You know, we just we thought we were on a spiritual quest, and we were hobos really, and we ended up pitching a tent in the mountains in southern Oregon and living there till the rains came, and then found this. Were invited to live by our spiritual advisor who lived up the hill in the plastic tent. There was this old log cabin way up on top of a mountain. Used to be a mining claim, had no roof. It was on BLM land, you know, and had no roof, so we threw a plastic tarp over the top, called it a skylight, and then the baby came. And I thought having this little girl was going to change the way I drank, you know. I had had enough therapy to know that you got to break the cycle of parenting. You got to become the parent you never had. You got to do it differently. By this time, I'm getting my clothes and shoes and the necessities of life out of a box behind a store in town, and I think I'm going to be a better parent than the ones I had, you know, because I was delusional. And my daughter got in the way of one of our fights when she was about 10 months old. I had to take her up the road where it's got to be better somewhere else. And I was, you know, of the mind that as long as I kept moving, I kept thinking there was hope. And so my first legitimate work was in the bar business, and it never occurred to me not to drink on the job. Why else would you have that job? It just seemed to me to be cosmically efficient, you know. And so I drugged that kid over 3 states, and we ended up down in Southern California, and I was renting a room for my aunt in Covina. And my daughter was almost 4 years old, and I had gotten a job about 30 miles away in Hollywood tending bar. Great job. Any healthy person could have made a great living doing what I was doing. Great boss, great people, great money, you know, could have been great. But me, I'm the common denominator. And so my aunt would watch my daughter while I would take off for work, and I'd leave her in the afternoon and I'd take off for Hollywood, and I'd get thirsty on the way, so I'd stop at the bar on the way to the bar. You know how we do. And I'd have a couple of shots of Cuervo and a couple of Bud Backs, you know, 2 drinks in alcoholic math. And then get up off the bar stool and head on out to Hollywood and go do my shift, you know, drink with everybody till the wee hours of the morning and start all over again in the morning and the next day. And I did that for months like clockwork until one afternoon I kissed my girl goodbye like I had been doing, and took off for Hollywood and got thirsty on the way, stopped at the same bar on the way to the bar. And to this day, I don't know what was different on that day from the day before except for 24 hours, because I didn't hate the job I was going to, and I didn't love my daughter any less on that day than I love her today. There was no drama or trauma or no fear or no unhappiness about needing to go to that job and not wanting to. I love that job. You know, but it wasn't enough to overcome the phenomenon of craving that happens once I start to drink. And for whatever reason, that was the day. That was the day that I could no longer have my drinks and get up and drive out to Hollywood and go do my shift. I was 24 years old. And nor was the knowledge that my little girl was waiting at home for her mommy so that we could play a little bit when I got home late. and then go to sleep and wake up in the morning and do it again for a little while, and then Mom, get up and go to work. You know, wasn't enough to overcome the phenomenon of craving that happens once I start to drink. And I pound this, I know I pound the table a lot about this physical factor, but it's just simply because no matter how spiritually fit I get, I could be floating rainbows, you know, like somewhere down the line. Like, no matter how perfect my life gets, no matter how good I feel, I will never, ever, ever safely be able to drink alcohol in food form or mouthwash form or any form at all. And that, I will just never be able to do that. And that is part of what I concede to. It's also the impetus for the reason I continue to take the steps, because I know what's at stake. If I don't, and if I let my spiritual condition wander, what's at stake for normal people, for non-alcoholic people, because they go through the same thing. We don't have alcoholic anxiety. We just have anxiety. We have human being anxiety. We have a lot of human feelings the same. But what's at stake for us as alcoholics is that we wander back to what we know will fix it right away. You know, to hell with the spirituality, that takes work. And alcohol was always so much quicker than a prayer, wasn't it? So, So I sat on that bar stool and I drank those drinks, and I lost the kid and I lost the job that day. And I lived off the kindness of strangers there in that little area until I fell into another job in another dive bar. And you know, for 4.5 years, every day I came to her, I woke up and I knew that my daughter was better off where she was. She wasn't with me. And my heart would break every single day, and I still couldn't stop drinking. It wasn't enough. Just wasn't enough. And I ended up meeting and marrying my drinking partner at another bar, you know, right about the time we should have split up. But I kept thinking if I put my circumstances back together, it was going to make everything right. You know, if we move indoors on a regular basis, you know, and so we got married. We just became the neighborhood entertainment. We used to settle our arguments with a shotgun. Whoever got to the gun first won. That's how we did it. And it was chaotic and dangerous and really frightening. And I got my daughter back when she was about 8.5, and I didn't get sober till she was almost 10. And you'd think that somebody like me, once I got her back, would straighten up and fly right? You'd think, God, with all that going on, now she's got it, right? And I had one job when I got her back, one job during the week, 5 days a week, and that would be to get in the car in the afternoon and go pick her up from school and bring her home. That was the only job I had, and most days I made it. But this particular afternoon, I got in the car to head on over to go pick her up, and on my way over, I got thirsty. And I know that those are 3 words that send chills down the spine of any recovered alcoholic, because we know what that means when we've got no spiritual defense against the first drink. You know, I got thirsty, I pulled into the driveway of the bar. And I bellied up to the bar and ordered a drink, and I started to drink it. And as I drank, I looked at the clock and thought, I got 45 minutes, I'm going to have this one, just one, and then I'm going to go get her. And then I start thinking, maybe 2, I probably have time for 2. And then as I'm drinking the second one, I think 3 at the most. I'm going to have 3, and then I'm going to go get her. And then somebody lines up the bar with empty shot glasses, and I can't turn down a free one, so I'm going to have 4, and then I'm going to go get her. And then I have 5 and 6, and then I'm late. Late to go pick up the most important person in the world. Again. And now I'm drunk, and I'm in the car, and I'm driving over to her school to go pick her up. You know, and here's, you know, the point I'm trying to make is that it wasn't all the time, always the times that I set out to get drunk. You know, I come in here when I was new and a little bit, you know, full of ego, you know, saying things like, oh, I never wanted just 2 drinks, blah, I always got insanely drunk, blah, blah, blah. You know, but really, sometimes I just wanted to have a couple and go get the kid. Just have a couple and go finish my shift. Just have a couple and get to work. Just have a couple and go do what I need to do. Why can't I do that? I see people do it all the time. Why can't I do that? So I'm driving to her school, and I'm drunk, and I have to go into the front office to get her because that's where they keep the kids whose parents can't get there in time. And as I go walking into the office, the best defense is an offense, so I'm mad at the staff now because I'm late. And I go walking into the office, storming into the office, and I trip over my own feet as I go into the office of where my daughter attends school, and I trip over my own feet and I go rolling across the floor. And as I went rolling across the floor of the office where my daughter attends school, I caught a glimpse of her face and the look in her eye as she watched her mother go rolling across the floor. And I felt that sense of powerlessness, not the kind of powerlessness like, oh my God, I have got to do something about this. But the kind of powerlessness like, oh my God, I am never going to change. I'm never going to change. I am always going to be like this. So the best thing I could do was to get up, best I could, grab her hand and get out to the car before somebody called the police like they were threatening to do. And that kind of thing happened over and over and over again for the next little over a year. Until finally, one Saturday afternoon, my husband and my daughter and I are living in this tiny little apartment. How we were still together with my husband, I have no idea. We were just hanging on by a thread. It's Saturday afternoon, and the gun's out, and the neighbors are watching, and the cops are there, and the kids scared to death standing in the corner, and none of us meant to do that. None of us started the day out saying, let's do this. We all thought, if everybody will be cool, we'll all be all right. But then we drink, or I drink, or he drinks, and if he hadn't, I wouldn't, and if it just goes there. So the cops leave, they take the gun, the husband left for the last time, and it's me and the kid and the booze, and I still couldn't stop drinking. And here's where a hard drinker might take a look at their life and say, I'm really tired of this. A hard drinker can change for a good reason. A hard drinker might even need to go to detox for a week or two to help, get his health back. But then they go back to work, have a story to tell if somebody asked them, and they move on with their life. That's a hard drinker. Me as an alcoholic, what I did was I just pulled the booze closer to the couch so I didn't have to keep getting up to get another drink. Because I drank through my circumstances. I drank through drug addiction, and I drank through homelessness, and I drank through the loss of my daughter, and I was getting ready to do it again. Standing on the precipice, and my first sponsor told me if I wanted to effect a conscious contact with a power greater than myself, I might start by counting the coincidences that happen in my life. Those situations that seem to fall together for the good of everyone without me having my hands on it, coincidences, and I like that idea. And the first one I could count was that I had moved in next door to a woman who had 5 years of sobriety in AA. And she had seen and heard that whole deal go down, and she came over a couple days later and brought me a big book and a 12 and 12, and she just sat on my couch and she told me her story. And she didn't talk about me or what she saw or point her finger or talk about how nasty I had been. She talked about her and her drinking, and in her story I heard me and mine. And I thought about the times that as she was talking about the times I'd run into her in the parking lot or in the laundry room, and she hadn't been drinking then either. And what impressed me more about that was it didn't seem to bother her that she wasn't drinking, and that got my attention. I didn't know how you do that. All I knew is that when I had no booze and I had no steps or fellowship or God of my understanding, I felt like you stripped the coating off my wires. I felt oversensitive and underloved, and I didn't know what you meant by that or why you looked at me that way. And my self-centered head would close in on me from there. So much so that even though I knew a little bit about booze by that time, I knew I couldn't ever guarantee if I was going to have 2 or 22. I knew that. I knew that the window of relief had gotten really, really small, 20 good minutes. I also knew that I no longer had to invite trouble into my life. It just seemed to come to visit unsolicited, right? You just open the front door and there it is. So I didn't know how her 12 little thinly veiled Sunday school sentences were going to have any effect on me in the face of what I'd become. They just seemed a little weak, like maybe I'd tried them all before. Because after all, everything that I came with, everything that I was born with is still going to be here. But I got to find a new solution. It's not that the stuff I was born with is alcoholism. It's the way I started to deal with it that created alcoholism. I had to have having alcoholism, I can't have alcohol as my solution. I got to have another way. And this way is slow sometimes. And it's messy sometimes. And it's uncomfortable. And I don't always look good. Hardly ever look good when I'm going through something like that. Sometimes dignity and grace go right out the window, So I didn't get sober that day. It was about a week and a half later. I just didn't go back and buy any more booze. And my daughter was away for a week or so, and And I just sat in that little apartment. There was no more treatment left for me. People have been trying to help me all my life. And there comes a time, and I believe at least it happened for me, that it had to come from the inside. I couldn't do it for somebody else. It had to come from the inside. I had to ask how from inside. And that weekend I sat in my little apartment and I didn't go anywhere, and I got sick. I shook it out and into Monday and into Tuesday, and by Tuesday afternoon I was stark raving sober and found myself back on my neighbor's doorstep. Just one more little wormhole of grace shot me right over to her doorstep, and I cooperated with it, and that's the thing, is that we might hear the call or have the, moment of clarity or whatever, but if I don't do anything about it, it just becomes a moment that passed. And I found that a lot of times early on especially, and even still now sometimes, that a lot of the new actions I took were like holding my nose and closing my eyes and jumping. Okay. And when she told me to go up to Sierra Madre and go up to this meeting, gave me the address, and I found myself doing it. She said, not that there'll be any big question, but when they ask for newcomers, tell them that you're new. And so I went back, and I went up there, and I sat way back by the open door and the exit sign just in case. And I heard a lot of that pre-meeting chatter, that joy, that joyful helpfulness that we hear, before meetings. How you doing? How's that 4th step coming? Did you get a big book yet? Do you have a sponsor? Do you need a ride home? Would you like a cup of coffee? All those things, right? And then I heard somebody say, hey, Joe, how's your lawn? And I thought, what? And I was kind of moved by that. I thought, oh my God, could my life ever be so elegant and simple as to be concerned about a lawn? Like up till then it had been so much about hustling and scraping and holding on. Could it ever be just about sitting on a front porch on a Saturday afternoon smelling fresh cut grass? Could it be like that? It sounded good to me. And at the end of the meeting, the secretary asked me to read something, and I read, and as I read, I came into the room just a little bit, which is kind of like a hint. One of my favorite lines in the book is, what seemed at first a flimsy reed turned out to be the loving and powerful hand of God. Whatever you think God might be, soul, psyche, a good feeling, just good. Whatever your sense of a higher power might be. And I found myself not thinking about myself for just a few minutes, just like when I say yes to anything else you ask me to do. Will you lead? Will you read? Will you give that person a ride? When I'm doing that, when I'm stacking chairs or pouring coffee, I'm not thinking about me. What seemed at first a flimsy reed, all these flimsy reeds. My whole sobriety is based on a foundation of flimsy reed after flimsy reed, and cups of coffee and rides and phone calls and steps, and sometimes, and especially early on, it felt to me kind of like I was supposed to be taking the steps just to keep me busy, so whatever this power is could slide in, just like get my attention off of that for a minute, just stop thinking about yourself. And over time it's become a kind of a nice blend of footwork. I got to do some footwork. I can't just sit around and wait for God or whatever this thing is. Oh, let God do it. I don't think God wants my jealousy to be removed today. I don't think God wants my laziness to be removed. No. Waiting for God to do it. No, so I have a responsibility in my own sobriety. Anyway, I got a sponsor and I took the steps, and I had to drink one more time at 89 days, and then I got to stay. And thank God, my sponsor, I took a drink and had to finish that drunk for like 24 hours or something. And when I called my sponsor, she didn't say, oh, too bad, you had your chance. She came over, picked me up, and took me to the big book study. And they didn't say, oh, too bad, you had your chance. Somehow you sit in the back row, or you sit in the step 2 row, or the bad girl row. They said, hey, you want to come up and make coffee on Tuesday with us? And I thought, dang, somebody thinks that I'm going to be here on Tuesday. And I came on the days in between, And I had to stay very close to you guys. I had to. And until the steps could take root inside me. And now, all these years later, when the meeting doors close behind me, I walk free in the world as well. That's what this is for. AA is a means, not an end. And tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous, I get to be a citizen of the world again, a contributing citizen, a responsible citizen. So about 9 months sober, I made that first round of amends to my family, and I say first round because my family required a lot of follow-up. You know, I had followed up on breaking their hearts for a long time, especially my daughter, and even with all the willingness, for all the parents in here, you know, even with all the willingness I had, because I knew I had done damage, but even with all the willingness, it was difficult. And it took us from the time she was 11 till she was about 23, you know, for us to really get this, to clean it all up and to get on the good foot, you know. And when she was about 11, she, well, I'll go into that in a minute, but yeah, so 9 months sober, my family, there's still not one member of my family who'll stand in the doorway and say, no, please don't go to the meeting. My family never does that. And nor does my family ever have to worry about where I am or don't I love them or why can't they find me. That doesn't happen either. I'm the matriarch of our family. I get the family together for the events, you know, and my dad and I have a good relationship. He doesn't have to sit up nights anymore watching the news to make sure his daughter's name isn't on the list of the victims of the serial killers of the day anymore. He sleeps well and he knows why. And then a couple years in, you know, my daughter was 11 years old and she was coming home beat up and bloody. She'd been drinking and using. She was, you know, really angry. And I had you guys, and she didn't have anybody, so it was time to get her some big help. And I had to find a treatment center for her. I didn't, you know, she wasn't interested in Alateen, and she needed something big. And so I found this treatment center, and I showed up when they asked me to, and I stayed away when they asked me to. And she was there for about 6 months, and, you know, you guys taught me that mountains are moved a spoonful at a time. You know, every day I do the footwork, and the results we leave to the powers that, you know, to the combination of power, whatever that is, and the all-knowing and the unknown. Slowly but surely, you know, when she got out, you know, we had difficulties, but it was better. It was like that sobriety cha-cha with anything, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 back, 1 forward, 2 back, with anything, really. And I was all in. And thank God that all these years later, I haven't had to be perfect ever, except entirely abstinent, but I haven't had to be perfect, but I have had to be all in. Any challenge that has arisen, I have had to allow to drive me further in, not out. And if I do that, you know, come in messy. If you're messy, come in messy. If you're bright, come in bright. You know, bring you. And when she was 16, she came home, she was pregnant, and I got to tell her I'll be there no matter what. I got to be present at the birth of my first grandson, and that kid just started his job as a practicing attorney about 6 months ago and just celebrated his 28th birthday. And then she had another young boy, had another baby about 5 years later, and now he's a young man, he's 22, and he's out working in the world, and he didn't want to go to school yet after high school, so he's trying to find his way in the world and decide what he wants to do, but they're really good young men. And she's a better mother than I could have ever tried to be, you know, she's just done it. And just a few years ago, I sat with my new husband and my mended family, and we watched her collect her master's degree, and she became a social worker with the crisis impact team with the police department, and she became one of those people who goes into the aftermath of things like the Las Vegas shooting and the San Bernardino terrorist act and helps the people of the family of the victims put the pieces of their lives back together. And that's who she is. That's who she's become. And I don't know if she is who she is because or in spite of me, but I know that because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I get to be a privileged witness in her life and in the lives of anyone who wants to be in mine. When I was 5 years sober, I was raped by an intruder who came into my apartment in the middle of the night. He crawled in through the kitchen window. He had a knife. And when I woke up, I didn't hear him come in. I had concrete floors. And so when I woke up, he was standing over me, and he said, "Don't say a word or I'll cut your head off." And he took the telephone cord and he tied me up, and he raped me and robbed me there. He was there in my room for a few hours. And I was a bit surprised because, after all, I was working 12 golden steps. And had to come around and realize, this happens to people. I mean, it happened to me certainly a lot before I got sober, but wait. And, quick wake-up call. And he was there for a few hours, and I tried to run for the front door, and the bolt lock kept me locked in. And we got into a little altercation, and instead of getting more angry, he dropped the knife and he went out the same window he came in. And it turned out that I knew him. I'd actually watched him get sober 30 days before I did, and watched him get his life, his wife, his kids, and everything back. And then I watched him join the church and leave AA behind. And when he went out, that's what happened. And what I chose to learn from that is that, well, the big book tells us to be quick to see where religious people are right, to make use of what they offer. Man, avail yourself. I do. I love finding the connection between any spiritual practice I come across. Science, spirit, all of it. It's, if God is everything, what part of that is not God? So, but what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that I am not one of those people who can go home after a Sunday sermon and have a glass of wine. I come here and I remember who and what I am, what I have there, and then I can go out there and practice whatever I want. Some people like one. I have a main, but I have some others. And it's not like we have any better or bigger spiritual principles than anybody else. We have the same ones they do. It's just that we take them and we aim them right at alcoholism. They do it, and they talk about them in general so that anybody in the world can walk in and get them. And we take them and we aim them right at alcoholism so that we can be enabled to go back out into the world and blend in. Tethered to, not instead of, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just think, it just seems that somewhere along the line he forgot that. And I have seen my friends forget that at 12 years of sobriety and 25 years of sobriety and 40 years of sobriety, that first half of the first step. And I'm still talking about it 35 years later. It's crucial. Our big book spends 51 pages talking about it, so I think it's pretty important. Anyway, there was a trial that followed, and as part of the defense, they had a lot of the guys I'd known years before get up and testify as to who I used to be. And kind of like a big public fifth step. So I had to get a character witness for me. And by that time, I was working at a big fancy investment firm downtown LA, a place I never would have walked in the front doors of years before. I would have had no business being there. And yet now, class by class and task by task, I'm walking the halls right alongside some very accomplished people, undetected. And the division head there volunteered to come and testify on my behalf, and they told him all about who I used to be. You could not use the words Carla and good character in the same sentence when I got here. And now 5 years later, you could. And they told him all about who I used to be, and he said, I don't know. He said, she shows up early and she stays late, and she was where she said she was. And see, that's Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. He didn't have to be coached. He just got up and told the truth as he'd experienced it through me. And then it was my turn to testify, and my sponsor and I had been talking about needing to forgive this guy. That's the first thing she said to me. She said, we're people who can't handle even seemingly justifiable resentments. And I know she's right, but at 5 years of sobriety, anger was still my favorite go-to, and there's nothing wrong with anger on its face or if it's motivating, but if it's not transformational, it becomes resentment. And it sits inside me, and it is absolutely destructive. And I don't want to be there. I don't even once in a while, a little stupid, delicious resentment will catch my attention for a minute. But I really don't want to walk around with them. But the guy had scared me. And so the 7-step prayer became my mantra for a while. And I'm not really a nugget prayer sayer, but that prayer got me from point A to point B every day until I didn't need it anymore for that. It got me from the bed to the coffee pot and the coffee pot to the shower, and just helped me pay attention and to what I was supposed to be doing. And so I'm sitting in the witness stand, and I look out and I see him sitting at the defense table, and I realize that's a place where I've sat before, and I'm thinking about page 67 in the big book paragraph, though they disturbed us, though their symptoms disturb us, and we don't like the symptoms and the way these disturb us. They, like ourselves, are spiritually sick. He, just like me, haven't I sat where he sat, and couldn't I sit there again? Haven't I roared through the lives of others like that proverbial tornado? Couldn't I do it again? Or am I right now doing something destructive to somebody, so filled with self that I can't see it? Maybe not rape, but something equally as destructive, or just, something that's hurtful. But the playing field got leveled again, And those principles there in my 10 steps, in my current, continuing inventories, haven't I, couldn't I, or am I, slows me down. The minute I'm getting ready to judge you for something, haven't I, couldn't I, or am I? And so the playing field was leveled. The forgiveness came that day. We became two alcoholics sitting on opposite sides of the courtroom. And the healing took a while longer, but it came too. And there was a lot of work to be done, a lot of 10 steps in that. I did a few in that third column of the inventory, what it affected, what I thought it affected, my belief system about all of this stuff that had started from way back. And even though I had done a really thorough fourth step with my sponsor, now later on, it's beginning, more is being revealed and more is being, come up for discarding, which is, what we do. So he was sentenced to 20 years, and he did 12, and he did 3, and then as far as I know, he wasn't able to stay out of prison, but I know it works in prison. I've had the privilege of carrying the message into every place I was ever locked up, and then there was a men's prison I was going to for a little while with friends, and then the men and women's county jails, and wherever it's worked, it works, whatever spiritual principles, but, we don't claim to have the market cornered on spiritual awakenings, but in case you're not having one, try ours. Just in case, we don't want to argue the point, but if you're not, try ours. The detective who worked the case came to me after it was over, and he said, I don't know who you were back then, I'm not even sure I want to know, but whatever it is you're doing now, keep doing it because it seems to be working. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous speaking for itself. And we didn't know it at the time, and I'm glad we didn't until after the trial was over, but the judge had been a long, sober, recovered alcoholic, and the court reporter was the Al-Anon mother of a woman in my home group. So the 12-step fairies had thoroughly dusted the room, before we got there. And my sponsor came to that trial, and my father came, and my friends came, and people from my home group came, and so I didn't have to go through it alone if I didn't want to. And that was the first 6 years of my sobriety. Right after that, my dad got cancer and asked me to walk through that with him, and it wasn't that cool, but there was a cool moment in all of that, and that's when I took him in on the day of his surgery. The lobby of the place where we were checking him in overlooked the old juvenile hall yards where he used to have to come visit me and come to court. And I thought, I like this view much better, helping my dad. And so, and on it went. Life just began to happen, and I've made bad business decisions. I've had great jobs, been great at work, made some bad mistakes, been bankrupt, had big jobs, little jobs, no jobs, had a business of my own, even not long ago and being reinvented or cooperated with being reinvented over and over and over, and so it's been an exciting life. And had a little business, and then the pandemic came, and so that shut down. And then on to something else, and I was playing with this art. I was playing with art kind of like a hobby during this time of being, isolated and stuff, and all of a sudden now I'm working furiously on packing up multiple pieces now to drive them across the country to deliver them to people who wanted to buy them, which we were talking about the chrysalis and the butterfly. The butterfly or the caterpillar does not give permission for the chrysalis to overcome him. He just goes, what the? And cooperates then, right? And can't really have the outside help or it will kill him. Just the encouragement, just walking alongside, just saying, yep, we can do it. I met my husband, who a lot of you met. I was 21 years sober. when we finally got together. So hang in there, if it's... My first 10 years of dating was a lot different than my second 10, and I really, really learned and got to digest the idea, the principle that just anybody is not a substitute for nobody, that it's okay to wait, and that there's a lot else to do, and there's a lot of other ways to love. It's all love is love is love. And he's my best friend, and oh my God, we laugh a lot, and he's been sick the last couple of years. He's got COPD, and so watching him deal with that is kind of strange, because there's nothing I can do. I mean, I can do some outside helping things, but he's got to breathe on his own, and so that's been weird watching his life change, and we're all getting older, and as we should. And I want to do it sober. See, I started doing this because I had to. I wanted to raise my kid, and if I could get her through high school and then I could die, just go off in a corner somewhere. Just, that was my attitude. Oh, okay, I'll be done. But what happened inside me now, I like what's happened, so I want to do the work. I want to do what, it's not painful in a bad way, if that makes sense, And every day I wake up and my feet at the floor and I say thank you. I don't know what I'm saying thank you to. My concept and experience with this power we call God has changed over and over and over and grown exponentially, and all I can do is welcome what's next. If it's all supposed to be here, then okay. The mosquito belongs in the meditation. If something I don't like happens in my life during the day, that's just the mosquito and the meditation, right? Okay, there you are, But step 11 is a step. It's not extra credit, as my friend says. So taking the time, and even if I only ever did what it tells us to do on pages 84 through 88 for steps 10 and 11 every day. Don't forget 84 and 85. It's how we do a better 11, and 11 is how we do a better 10. If I only ever did that, I'd have a pretty good life. But inside of those pages, it also says, go out there and see what they're doing. Go out there and see what's been happening for years and years and years and years, and what's worked, what practices work. It might work for you too. I have a condition called alcoholism, but my humanity is the same as everybody else's. I want to rejoin with the world, and that's not to say, that I'm not an alcoholic anymore. It's to say, and I'm an alcoholic, but I've also got a human condition, and so we're not a different species. So when I'm walking out in the world, I'm another human being, and I don't have to continue to separate myself from them either. So I look for those similarities as well. But I've got to be firmly based in what's at stake for me if I don't. Because if it ever gets so uncomfortable that I forget what I am, then I'm in trouble. And I've seen it happen. So I don't have to walk around in fear, but I have a deep, deep respect for taking care of my spiritual condition. And then I share it, So I come to trust the process in steps 1 through 9, continue it in 10, grow it in 11, and share it in 12, inside and outside the rooms. My sponsor gave me this prayer a couple of years ago, several years ago now, and she says I remembered it wrong, so I guess there are two now, but I like mine. And she said, ask God to grant you the heart of a grateful servant. And when I say that prayer, I feel good. It makes me feel joyful. And meditation doesn't create colors shooting out my ears, or some days have some pretty cool experiences, but what it does is it readies me to walk out in the world and be more responsive than reactive, more useful than isolating and defensive. It just gets me ready, because after all, isn't the whole point of this to become of maximum service to those about us? And in doing so, I've got to be free of resentment. I've got to be free of the stuff that blocks me from this spirit and blocks me from you. So if you're new, I hope you'll come in, get uncomfortable with us, let us know, and start taking the new actions, because it does get different, it does get better. And for me, I've got to say, in my humble opinion, or not so humble sometimes, it works, it really does. Thanks.